All right, guys, I just want to welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick will be breaking down our 2023 Baylor Bears college football season preview. Look at this coaching staff. Dave Aranda, 20-16 record through 3 seasons. He's going to be joined by Jeff Grimes, who are also going to be entering his third year. Matt Prowledge, his second stint with the Bears, will be replacing Ron Roberts as defensive coordinator. Bears, they return only 8 starters in effort of a bounce-back year. You look at this offense, Jeff Grimes, this is a team that's got a wide zone, physical running game. And there's going to be a lot of improvement, I think, on the ground. Richard Reese, he returns. This is a guy that keeps his feet moving. He's a great slasher, hits the hole in a hurry. Some good vision and contact balance. Really impressive at the goal line. He can only burst into a pile and make it work for him at 5'9", 175. They had Dominic Richards from Oklahoma State. He can quickly shed a defender and make a cut in the same motion. He's an effective physical back. Not as efficient. This is a pretty deep backfield for the Baylor Bears. They also have Quilon Jones, so a nice 3-man solid rotation there. Blake Shapen at quarterback. He didn't exactly progress the way I expected last year. This is still a guy that's great potential and very impressive touch. I like his decision making. Has no issue throwing in the tight windows. A gritty football player, some good accuracy, some good rip with precision. Pretty impressive player on the move. He can run and deliver a nice ball in the same motion. A real good gamer who needs to keep adding size, only about 200 pounds. So durability, I think, is certainly a concern for him. You mix that, Nick, with an offensive line that adds Clark and Campbell Barrington from BYU. They reunite with Jeff Grimes here. Clark, he has very good mobility and range for climbing to the second level. Some good angles. Strong run blocker, 6'6", 305. Quicker defenders can certainly take advantage of rushing into him while he's getting into his set. But he's tough to collapse in pass protection, though. They also keep Gavin Byers at 6'5", 310. He was a quality, solid right tackle last year. He might kick inside. There's lots of youth on the second string. Tate Williams, he might be tested by George Molly. These guys are both under 300 pounds. And then Campbell Barrington, of course, he was a great add. Expected to follow in his brother's footsteps. This is a team that only gets 3 starters back on this side of the ball, Nick. The offensive line loses 4 starters, so they're getting a good revamp up front. This is one of the nation's better units for them. Michael McCausey, unfortunately, transferred out to Florida for the Bears, but overall, I think this is a very solid offense, and that's before we even talk about the receiving core.
This is not a bad offense to start off. I think Blake Shapen as well as a solid quarterback. I'm glad to see him returning. Had a good year last year. All right, 63% completion percentage, 2,700 yards, 18 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, right? You certainly can expect him to make a step up here and improve a little bit here. I like Richard Reese a whole lot, 972 yards on the ground last year, 4 yards for him. Also a weapon in the receiving. And we haven't talked about this receiving core yet. This offensive line, a lot of room to improve, right? They have a lot of replacements here, but I think there are some talented players who are stepping in. I like Gavin Byers a lot. Clark Barrington as well. I think that he's a good player. And Campbell Barrington, of course, a solid player as well, both transferring in. I like to see Campbell on the left tackle his position there. This is a solid offensive. I think this is a good quarterback play out of Shapen. I think he's got room to grow here and can definitely improve.
Now you look at the receiving core. Monterey Baldwin, one of the fastest players in college football. This is a guy labeled last year as a potential breakout star for the Bears. I'd say he did that very well. The versatility, the immense deep threat. You can win underneath. Really struggled with health, but when he was on the field at 5'9", 164, he certainly made an impact with his 33 grabs for 565 yards, over 17 yards per touch, only 4 scores. Hal Presley comes back as well. Keatron Jackson, this is a guy from Arkansas, long strider, get downfield in a hurry, some good catch radius, some body control, 6'2", 203. So I think that's one of the biggest backdraws for this football team. They certainly need to have other guys step up. But of course, Presley coming back, Josh Cameron, Jordan Neighbors, he's going to be a guy that has to certainly step up and make some plays for them. I don't think this is a bad receiving core by any means. Losing Ben Sims at tight end, I think that's certainly notable. So the depth is certainly going to be tested at this part of the football team. But overall, I gave this offense a B-, Nick. I definitely think that a more consistent running game is something they need to find, which I think is certainly going to be evident with some of these new additions on the offensive line. You look at how they performed at games last year. You look at 45 yards late in the year against Air Force. This team lost 4 games in a row. They ran for 232 against TCU in a game they should have won, and they turned around, dropped 101 against Texas, and of course that dud against Air Force. The week before that against Kansas State, only 103 yards. 112 in the loss against Oklahoma State. BYU, they didn't run the ball that well, less than 3 yards per touch on the road there at Provo. This is an offensive line, Nick, that I think has a lot of potential. They had a 3-game winning streak before losing 4 in a row. They had 230-plus rushing in each of those games. They also scored 4-plus touchdowns on the ground in each of those games. So how can this running game be more efficient and effective on a more consistent basis? Because Jeff Grimes, again, that's what he wants to do, is a physical running game with a lot of zone. How can they do it?
I agree. I think they just have to find a way to make this work. I like this wide receiving core. I think Monterey Baldwin's a solid piece coming back, 65 receiving yards last year, 4 touchdowns, very fast player. I have to focus on beefing up this offensive. I do like this offensive line, like I said. The additions of the Barrington brothers, I think they're very talented players. I think Byers as well, solid at left guard. They're going to have to be able to find those nice blocking holes and lanes for Richard Reese. I think Reese has a lot of talent that he returns here. I think he could be a potential breakout year if he can get the right groove going. Almost at 1,000 yards in the ground last year. I think he easily can get to 1,000 this year. They're gonna have to balance the playbook and make calls here that work for this offense. I think they got to get work on the ground game. 182.3 yards per game is not bad as a season whole, but like you said, they really fell off towards the second half of the season where they lost a bunch of games in a row there and really kind of derailed what was a promising start to a season for Baylor.
Looking at this defense, Matt Prowich takes over. He was on the staff from 2020 to 21. He was last year's Oregon co-defensive coordinator. This is a guy that has relentless effort mindset, wants to certainly implement more press also in this 3-3-5. You look at the portal, they lost 4 guys, 3 starters in the secondary depart. They did add 5 guys, though, on this football team. And it was anticipated the secondary would take a big step back. I said that they lost a lot of athleticism. And, the fall-off wasn't all that bad. 62nd in passing yards per game allowed. They weren't much worse outside of production. That was one thing that certainly dipped a good bit. Now, once more, though, they reset in the back end. The pass rush last year was half worse as it was when they won the Big 12 title. The run defense is certainly going to be a topic. Ika departs. 5 starters are back, 4 of them in the front 6. Only get 1 of them in the secondary. Look at this defensive line. Jarrell Boykin, 6'3", 341 from Hutchinson Community College. Also an LA Tech transfer. Trey Emery played in 1 game last year at 6'2", 318. Overall, this is a youthful group behind Gabe Hall. I do think they're a little concerning up front, though. Hall, this is a guy who has great hands with a high motor, variety of moves, pretty light on his feet with some good body control, nice bend as well, some really good quickness. Just marginal athletic abilities. Could be more productive for him at 6'6", 296. But I think overall in the interior, Hall is going to have to step up and be big for him. Byron Bonds comes over from Utah State. He's been an effective edge rusher in the past that makes plays behind the line often. Some great length. Really like his nice twitch and explosion, nice power. Only about 225 pounds, though, so we'll see how efficient and durable he can be this year. Garmin Randolph, an outside linebacker. A good power rusher. Stacks well and sheds with precision against the run. Like his motor, some good length and unique size. He's got 6'7", 247 as his billing, so that's why I say unique. Overall, Nick, there's a handful of guys that are really impressive here. Vaughns, Randolph, Hall. The depth is going to be challenged this year, though. What are the expectations for the Bears up front as they try to get back to being a crushing run defense?
I agree. I think there is some question marks here. I think Randolph's a good player, right? 42 total tackles last year, 7 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks. I like what he can do. I think he's a solid piece. I like Hall a lot, too. I think Hall has a good leadership on this team. He had 37 total tackles, 5.5 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks, right? So there's a lot of production out of those two returning. I think there are some question marks with this front 7. I think Matt Jones, another piece that I really like a lot. Of course, he's the leading returning tackler for this team, who had a pretty decent year last year, 65 total tackles, 4 for loss, and 2.5 sacks. There are a lot of question marks with this front 7. I think they weren't terrible last year, right? I think they weren't bad against the run. They weren't terrible through the air, but I think they got to work getting sacks, getting after the quarterback, and able to plug up those holes on the ground to help out the secondary.
The run defense was just as inconsistent as the offense was. The first 4 games, Zero allowed less than 90 yards in each of those. Schedule wasn't all that tough, but they did play 2 quality opponents in that regard. West Virginia had a bit of a field day against them, as did Oklahoma. And then, Air Force, they were certainly held below their total, but they were certainly having their way with this defense in that game. At linebacker, though, Mike Smith, a Liberty transfer, 85 tackles, 10 tackles for loss for him last time he touched the football field. Overall, is also sound in coverage, a good run stopper, nice playmaker. He's expected to have a monumental impact in this defense. Matt Jones, he took some big strides this past year, became more consistent versus the run and as a tackler. Dylan Doyle does depart, so I definitely like what they got at linebacker. Again, depth's going to be tested, I think, in this entire front 7, but if they can click, I think they're going to be great. TJ Franklin's another guy coming back to defensive end, the senior leader. David Marshall transferring in. I know you just talked about the front 7, but your final verdict on them, what's it going to be? Because I think they have a lot of potential, some really good players, especially in their starting lineup. But if durability starts to hinge and linger, I think they could certainly be in for a tough year.
Right, I agree. I think there's a lot of potential with this front 7. There's a lot of potential to disappoint as well. I think these guys, I like some of the leadership they return. Like I said, I like Jones coming back. I like Randolph. I think those guys are exciting pieces of the front 7. I just get a little concerned about this. They got to improve that number against the run per game. About 150 yards per game, 62nd in the nation. They got to improve that number here and plug those holes. They were very inconsistent, especially in the second half of the season, like you said. So they got to find that consistency, but stick with that balance for the front 7.
And like I said, when you talk about the secondary last year, expected them to fall off a good bit. And I think overall they were pretty sound. But again, they're going to retool here. They lose 3 guys to the portal. Very good football players as well. We'll touch on them in a second. But safety Devin Lemire has some big shoes to fill, and I think he's primed to be one of the nation's top safeties. Showcased some really good coverage and ball skills. Very impressive tackler and a run defender. He's going to emerge as a big-time leader for this unit. This is a player I'm very high on. Isaiah Dunson, the Miami transfer. He's approaching about 190 pounds. He was a pretty solid run stopper for the Canes in limited action. Guys like A.J. McCarthy and Bryson Jackson, they're making transitions in the secondary. There's a lot of youth here, Nick. And then you have those 3 transfers in Al Walcott, Lorando Johnson, both going to Arkansas, and then Devin Neal, another starter, headed to Louisville. Those are 3 really good starters that depart. What's going on here? Why do guys not want to play for Dave Aranda, especially when 2 years ago they had a big-time unit to put a handful of guys in the NFL?
Yeah, it's really confusing what's going on there. I think Devin Neal's a huge piece. They lose underrated player going to Louisville. I'm really disappointed to see him leave. With the direction this is going, I think Devin Lemire is a great player, right? 56 total tackles last year, 4 pass breakups, 2 interceptions, 2 fumble recoveries as well, right? He's kind of a do-it-all piece in the secondary. I like him a lot there. I think, Delvin Bobby as well, a young player as a sophomore. I'd like to see him be involved. But when you look at the secondary, right, it's a young secondary. Isaiah Dunson, of course, has that transfer experience, but Bobby, Lamar, and Williams are all redshirt sophomores, right? So this is a young secondary that does not have a lot of experience. You're going to have to kind of learn quickly and grow as players as the season goes on. I think there's a lot of inexperience here at the secondary, and it's interesting to see because they lose so much talent. So many guys, not bad last year, right? They transfer out, and now they have to plug in these younger guys who don't have a lot of experience. I think it's going to be quite the gamble out there for Baylor.
Al Walcott was a highly productive box safety for him. I definitely think this run defense needs to improve, and the pass rush could use a bit of a boost, which I certainly think they have the pieces to do so. I'm going to give this grade of a B to this unit. 24 sacks last year. That's a number that I think will certainly approach 30 this season. I think there's a high ceiling for them, especially when you have Dave Aranda in the building. What's the final grade going to be for you when you talk about the Bears defense?
I think a B is right. Nail it on the head. Run defense has to improve. I think this is a good unit on the front 7. There's potential to improve. And the secondary concerns me. There's a lot of young guys who could really be hit or miss here. They have to step up and be able to make those plays in the secondary after replacing so many players that have transferred out.
Now looking at the schedule preview and prediction, the offensive line figures to take a slight step back. It's not a given, but I think it's certainly a tad bit evident. This passing attack, though, has some good weapons. They can certainly win with a lot of speed. Baldwin and Keytron Jackson, I think they're going to have some fun this year. Very deep backfield. This one game should certainly be kept afloat. I think the balance is certainly going to be evident for them. I say we're going to definitely see some improvements on the offensive side of the ball. The defensive line has some concerns, as does the secondary, which will probably take another step backwards. But the front 6 as a whole, I think, is going to make up for it. I think Dave Aranda will have this defense clicking a bit better behind an improved pass rush. I'm going to go with 9-3, Nick. I'm really putting my trust in Dave Aranda in this staff. The first 3 losses, the only 3 losses really, they all come at home. So you look at the back half of the schedule, I have them winning every single game in that back half. That final 6 is going to be a clean sweep for me. And then picking this team, especially in Waco, to lose 3 home games, Utah, Texas, Texas Tech, these games are all going to be winnable for the Bears. This team could easily, with what I'm saying, maybe potentially go undefeated, because that doesn't seem realistic at all that a team like this loses 3 home games over the first 6 of the year. I'm very high on this football team. I think the over-under is a good over-lock, and I think this is potentially a team that could really a sleeper once again in the Big 12, much like they were 2 years ago. 9-3 for me. Am I putting too much faith into the staff? Does the schedule do it good justice? How do you feel about this Baylor football team?
I think you might put into a little too much faith, but I think the over-under, 7.5, I think they'll get over. This is easily achievable for this team. I think 9, definitely something they can get to. I think the road splits are very favorable for this team, right? At UCF, at Cincinnati, 2 teams that are joining the conference. A lot of question marks, both those teams making the jump up to this huge move up to the Power 5 level. At Kansas State, a lot of question marks to Wildcats this year. At TCU, even more question marks as they kind of revamp their entire team following their national championship run last season. So the road splits, I think, are very favorable for this team. Some of the home split teams as well, games that are very winnable. I think they could beat Texas Tech. I think they could beat Texas. Utah, that's a team that's talented in the Pac-12, but a lot of question marks there. So there certainly is a possibility this team could be, pushing 10, 11, 12 wins and competing in the Big 12. I think they have a great shot to compete for the Big 12 title. I think this is a team that has a lot of production on offense that's returning, as well as production on defense that is potentially returning. I think as long as they can step up, get the secondary in order with the young guys and have the wide receivers and be able to find a balance to run the ball, I think the sky's the limit for this team, and 9 wins is definitely achievable. 11 potentially. The line at 7.5. I think the over is definitely a lock here. I like at least 8 wins for this team. Just looking at the schedule, it's a very favorable schedule for this team in the Big 12.
Now, it's hard to put much faith in this team considering they did drop the final 4 games of the year. Some pretty poor efforts in that one, but they also did go head-to-head with TCU, and they probably should have won that game. Back in 2021, I was very high on this defense. No one was talking about Baylor. The defense ended up living up to the mark, and then the offense also exceeded expectations, which in return led to them winning the conference. I think you could certainly see a very similar audition here. So this is going to be a good football team, Nick. I appreciate you joining me once again.
Absolutely. I think it's a team that's got a really nice schedule here. I think it's a good road home splits for them. There's a lot of talent. I think Dave Aranda is a fantastic coach, and this team is looking to have a huge bounce back after a really disappointing season last year.
Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.